My wife refused to pay her promised share of a massive family expense because I needed to act like the primary provider, calling me a pathetic excuse for a husband. So, I completely shattered her superiority complex by exposing just how desperately she relies on my financial safety net to survive. We've been married for 7 years, and for 6.5 of them, I genuinely believed we were a team playing to our respective strengths. I work as a commercial architect. It's a demanding, high-stress job, but it pays a very reliable $165,000 a year. My wife, Coralie, runs a boutique wellness and lifestyle blog. She sells imported matcha, aesthetic yoga mats, and posts daily routines about mindfulness. On paper, her business nets roughly $22,000 annually. I never cared about the income disparity. We had an arrangement that functioned beautifully. Because my salary covered the mortgage, the health insurance, the car payments, and the private school tuition for our 2 kids, Tam and Imogen, Coralie had the freedom to pursue her passion without the crushing weight of overhead. In exchange, we divided the household labor according to our schedules. I handled the grueling morning chaos. I'm up at 5:30 a.m. every day. I make the oatmeal, pack the lunches, find the missing shoes, wrestle Tam into his coat, and do the school drop-off before fighting traffic to my firm. Coralie, whose time is entirely flexible, handled the afternoon pickups and the scheduling. While I was packing backpacks, she was usually in the spare bedroom we converted into her studio, filming a 45-minute guided meditation or doing her morning skincare routine. It worked. I had stability, she had flexibility, and we built a life around it. Then came the invitation to Asheville. Coralie's older brother, Stellan, is a partner at a private equity firm in Atlanta. He is the family golden child, a man whose entire personality is built around his net worth and his ability to make everyone in the room painfully aware of it. Stellan and his wife, Blythe, decided to rent a massive luxury lodge in the mountains of North Carolina for a week-long family getaway. They invited us. The lodge was a sprawling, 8,000-square-foot timber frame monstrosity built into the side of a cliff featuring floor-to-ceiling glass, radiant heated floors, and a wraparound deck overlooking the valley. We drove up from Charlotte in my 5-year-old Subaru sedan, the kids kicking the back of my seat for 3 hours. When we finally crunched up the long gravel driveway, Stellan's brand new Porsche Cayenne was parked perfectly in the center of the motor court, gleaming in the afternoon sun. The dynamic shifted the absolute second I put my car in park. Coralie unbuckled her seatbelt, took a deep breath, and her entire posture changed. She seemed to shed the reality of our life, the budget meetings at the kitchen table, the shared calendar, the messy reality of raising 2 kids, and slipped into a bizarre, hyper-elitist persona. She walked into that lodge and immediately adopted a slight, affected drawl, matching Blythe's energy perfectly. I lugged 3 heavy suitcases up the stone steps by myself while Coralie stood in the foyer, sipping sparkling water that Stellan had poured her, laughing at a joke I didn't hear. The disrespect started on day 1. We were sitting around the massive Live Edge dining table. Stellan poured a $300 bottle of cab and looked at me down the length of the wood. "So, still drawing other people's buildings, huh?" he asked, taking a slow sip. "Let me know when you get tired of the hourly grind and want to actually own the dirt. I could probably find you a junior project manager spot on one of my commercial builds." It was a blatant, insulting downgrade from my actual profession, designed specifically to make me look small. I looked at Coralie, waiting for her to jump in. She just laughed. A light, airy, practiced laugh. "Oh, you know him, Stellan. He likes the safety of a desk." It stung, but I swallowed it. It was day 1. I told myself she was just nervous, trying to impress a brother she had always idolized. Day 2, the mask slipped further. We were supposed to go on a family hike to a nearby waterfall. At 9:00 a.m., Stellan and Blythe were lounging on the teak deck furniture, drinking espresso from tiny ceramic cups. Coralie was standing next to them in a pristine, matching Lululemon set, reapplying sunscreen to her face while adjusting her visor. I was inside the mudroom, sweating through my t-shirt as I wrestled Tam into his hiking boots, packed 4 separate water bottles, double-checked the first aid kit, and crammed a dozen protein bars into a heavy canvas backpack. Stellan walked past the mudroom window, paused, and leaned on the doorframe. He watched me struggling with a whining 6-year-old for a long moment. "Playing the nanny today, huh?" He chuckled. I stopped zipping the bag. I looked up at him. "I'm parenting my kid, Stellan, like I do every day." Coralie stepped up behind him, holding her phone out to capture the mountain view for her Instagram story. Stellan looked back at her and smirked. "You trained him well, Cor. Got him packing the juice boxes while you managed the brand." Coralie didn't flinch. She didn't correct him. She offered a pathetic, tight-lipped smile, as if his disrespect was a compliment to her management skills. "He's good at the domestic stuff," she said lightly, not looking at me. It frees me up. I bit a hole through my cheek to keep from saying something that would ruin the vacation. Later that afternoon, I pulled Coralie into the massive slate tile kitchen while the others were out on the deck. I kept my voice low. "I need you to have my back out there. Stellan is taking shots at me, and you're just standing there validating him." She rolled her eyes, leaning against the marble island. "Don't be so sensitive. Stellan is just alpha. It's how highly successful men joke with each other. You're taking it personally because you're insecure about the income gap between you two. Just let it go." The sheer audacity of the word alpha coming out of my wife's mouth nearly knocked the wind out of me. It was as if she had been replaced by a pod person overnight. By day 3, the atmosphere was suffocating. We went out to dinner at a high-end steakhouse in downtown Asheville. The bill arrived in a black leather folder. I reached for it, knowing it would be astronomical, but fully prepared to cover our half. Stellan snatched it away before my fingers could touch the leather. "I got it," Stellan said loudly, making sure the entire table was watching. Real men usually focus on building the empire, not packing juice boxes. Consider it charity. The table went dead silent. Blythe smirked into her wineglass. I looked directly at Coralie. Her face was flushed, but she looked down at her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. She didn't say a single word. She just let me sit there, publicly emasculated by a man who treated his wealth like a weapon, because she was too addicted to the proximity of that wealth to defend her own husband. By day 4, the tension in my chest was a physical weight. To impress her brother, Coralie had grandiosely volunteered us to pay for a private helicopter tour over the Blue Ridge Mountains for all 4 adults. The cost was $30,500. Before the trip, when she had first floated this absurd idea, we had an explicit agreement. I told her flat out that a $3,500 helicopter ride was not in our family budget. She assured me, with immense pride, that she had a surplus in her business account from a recent brand partnership and that she would cover it entirely. It was her treat, her way of showing Stellan that she was successful too. The morning of the tour, Tam woke up screaming and pulling at his ear, a raging ear infection. While Coralie, Stellan, and Blythe enjoyed a catered breakfast in the dining room, I loaded a crying child into the Subaru and drove 40 minutes down the mountain to an urgent care clinic in town. I sat in a sterile waiting room for 3 hours, pacing the floor, rocking Tam, filling out paperwork, and waiting for antibiotics at the pharmacy next door. I finally got back to the lodge at 2:15 p.m. I was exhausted, my shirt was stained with spilled apple juice, and I had a pounding headache. I walked straight through the house and out onto the massive back deck. Coralie and Stellan were lounging on the oversized outdoor sofas, laughing loudly over fresh mimosas. The wind was gently rustling the pines. It was a picture of absolute, untroubled leisure. The tour company emailed the invoice for the flight at 4, I said, my voice flat, exhausted. They need the final payment processed an hour before takeoff. I need your card. Coralie didn't even look up from her phone. She took a slow sip of her drink. You pay it. I blinked, stopping dead in my tracks. The cold mountain air suddenly felt entirely still. What, Coralie? We agreed before we even left home. You said you were covering this from your business account. She finally looked up, and the expression on her face was one of profound, arrogant annoyance. She scoffed. Stop whining. My brother is right. You really need to step up. Real men handle the big expenses and don't expect their wives to drain their accounts just to keep things running. The deck went dead silent. I could hear the ice shifting in Stellan's glass. Stellan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, smirking in absolute approval. Welcome to the real world, man. You can't be the house husband forever. If my sister wants to treat the family, you should have the capital to back her up. That's on you. I looked directly at my wife. She looked incredibly smug, visibly empowered by his arrogant validation. She had completely sold me out to buy a seat at his table. All my exhaustion evaporated instantly. It wasn't anger that replaced it. It was a cold, absolute clarity. The kind of clarity that makes the edges of your vision sharpen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I opened my email. I scrolled to the message our CPA had sent over just 3 days prior, containing our finalized joint tax documents for the year. I opened the PDF, zoomed in on a very specific page, and dropped the phone flat onto the glass table directly in front of her. You want to talk about capital and providing? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Let's look at the actual numbers. Coralie frowned, looking down at the screen. Stellan leaned over, squinting at the document. That is Schedule C of our joint tax return, I stated, staring Stellan dead in the eye, refusing to look at her. Her wellness empire, the one you think she's managing while I pack juice boxes, it operated at a $14,000 net loss last year. She didn't make a dime. I turned my glare to Coralie. I watched the color rapidly drain from her face, her smug expression shattering into sudden, panicked realization. My salary alone paid her studio rent, I continued, my voice slicing through the mountain wind. My salary paid for her imported inventory. My salary paid for her website hosting, her camera equipment, and every single business trip she took. I fund 100% of our mortgage. I pay for the family healthcare. I pay the kids' private school tuition. Every single drop of the lifestyle she is pretending to have right now is subsidized by my 60-hour work weeks. Stellan's smirk vanished entirely. He looked at the phone, then slowly looked at his sister. I work myself into the ground to finance your entire existence while you play entrepreneur, I told her, my tone dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a shout. You don't have a surplus, Coralie. You have an allowance. Coralie opened her mouth, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. The absolute devastation of being exposed in front of the one person she desperately wanted to impress had paralyzed her. You are way too helpless to act this arrogant, I told her, leaning down to snatch my phone off the glass table. I am not your employee, and I am certainly not your ATM. I'm done playing this humiliating game. I turned my back on them and walked toward the sliding glass door. I'm canceling the helicopter tour, I called out without looking back. Explain to your brother why you lied about being able to afford it. I walked straight into the master bedroom. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and threw it open on the bed. I started throwing my clothes inside, not bothering to fold anything. I moved to the kids' room. Tam was asleep, flushed with fever. Imogen was reading a book on the rug. Pack your backpack, sweetie, I told her, keeping my voice incredibly calm. We're going on an adventure. Just you, me, and Tam. I pulled my phone out to book a room at the Omni Grove Park Inn, a massive historic luxury hotel in downtown Asheville. I needed to get the kids out of this toxic environment immediately. I opened my banking app to check my daily transfer limit for the deposit. The screen loaded. I stared at the balance. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Our joint checking account, which held the mortgage payment, the utility money, and my recent paycheck, a balance of just over $6,000, was nearly empty. It showed a balance of $314. At the very top of the transaction history was a pending transfer. Initiated exactly 3 minutes ago, $5,700 moved from our joint checking to Coralie's solo LLC business account. I stood in the doorway of the kids' room, the phone gripped so tightly in my hand the plastic case creaked. She had panicked. The second I walked away, humiliated and terrified of losing face in front of Stellan. She had drained our joint account to her own business account so she could turn around, swipe her business card for the helicopter, and pretend to her brother that my tax return comment was a lie. She had literally stolen the mortgage money to buy a temporary illusion. I didn't book the hotel. I couldn't. I turned around and walked slowly back down the long hallway toward the main living area. I turned the corner. Coralie was standing in the foyer, her back to me. She was holding her phone to her ear, her voice a frantic, desperate whisper. Yes, the transfer just initiated. How long until the funds are available to swipe? No, I need it immediately. The invoice is due in 20 minutes. Please, you have to expedite it. She turned around and saw me standing there. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. The blood rushed out of her face, leaving her looking hollowed out and gray. She knew that I knew. We were trapped in this massive, silent house, miles from anyone, and she had just crossed a line we could never ever walk back from. Cancel it, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. She lowered the phone slowly, her hand shaking so badly the screen tapped against her gold hoop earring. I can't. It's an expedited wire transfer. The bank already authorized it. Call them back. I just did, she whispered, her eyes darting around the massive foyer like she was looking for a place to hide. They said it's locked. It's moving to my business account. It'll clear in 10 minutes. I stared at her. The woman I had married, the mother of my children, had just drained the account that kept a roof over their heads to appease a brother who openly despised us both. You realize, I said, keeping my voice dangerously level, that money was for the mortgage, and the electric bill, and the water. You just stole the money that keeps the lights on in your children's bedrooms so you could buy a helicopter ride to impress Stellan. I was going to put it back. She hissed, her face contorting into an ugly, desperate mask. I have a new shipment of inventory coming in next week. I was going to run a flash sale. I would have made it back before the first of the month. You operated at a $14,000 $50,000 loss, Coralie. There is no flash sale. There is no surplus. You are completely delusional. Before she could spin another lie, the heavy oak doors of the great room swung open. Stellan walked into the foyer, his phone in one hand and a fresh drink in the other. He stopped when he saw us, taking in Coralie's pale, trembling face and my absolute stillness. Are we flying or not? Stellan asked, annoyed. Blythe is getting dressed. If we're going to make a 4 o'clock takeoff, we need to leave in 20 minutes. Coralie opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. We aren't flying, I said to him. Because Coralie doesn't have the money. Stellan rolled his eyes. You just went over this outside. I told you, man. If she can't afford it, just put it on your card. Stop making it a whole dramatic thing. It's pathetic. I don't have the money either, I said. Because your sister just emptied our joint checking account. She transferred the money we used to pay our mortgage into her business account 3 minutes ago, so she could swipe her card for your tour and pretend she's successful. Stellan froze. The condescending smirk wiped clean off his face, replaced by a look of profound disgust. He looked at Coralie. Is that true? He asked, his voice entirely devoid of the playful alpha male teasing from the deck. Coralie shrank in on herself. Stellan, please, it's not like that. I just needed to bridge a cash flow gap. You stole your husband's mortgage money to buy me a helicopter ride? Stellan's voice rose, echoing off the high timber ceilings. Are you out of your mind? Do you know how pathetic that is? You told me to. She cried out, tears finally spilling over her cheeks, ruining the perfect, effortless makeup she had spent an hour applying that morning. You said I needed to step up. You said I should treat the family. I said you should have the capital to back it up. Stellan snapped. I thought you were actually running a business, Coralie. I thought you weren't just a housewife playing on Instagram. I didn't tell you to commit financial fraud against your own family just to save face at a damn vacation rental. The betrayal on Coralie's face was absolute. She had sacrificed everything, her marriage, her financial security, her dignity, to earn his approval, and in a matter of seconds, he had looked at her like she was something scraped off the bottom of his shoe. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the implosion. I turned around and walked back down the hall to the kids' room. Imogen was standing by the door, her small backpack clutched in her hands. She looked scared. Daddy, are people yelling? She asked softly. Just grown-up stuff, sweetie, I said, forcing a smile I absolutely didn't feel. I crouched down and lifted Tam from the bed. He was groggy, his cheeks flushed from the fever, his small arms wrapping automatically around my neck. I grabbed my suitcase with my free hand. Come on, I said to Imogen. We're going to our own hotel now. We walked out into the hallway. The foyer was empty now, though I could hear Stellan's voice, harsh and biting, coming from the back deck, and the sound of Coralie sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't care. I walked out the front door, loaded the kids into the Subaru, and locked the doors. I pulled out my phone. I couldn't book the Omni Grove Park Inn anymore. With $314 in the checking account, I couldn't even afford a mid-tier Marriott. I opened my wallet and pulled out a blue credit card. It was a personal account I had opened years ago, before we were married, with a $5,000 limit. I had kept it active with a zero balance, just in case of an absolute emergency. This was it. I found a Hampton Inn, right off the interstate, about 20 minutes away. I booked a double queen room, started the car, and drove down the mountain. The silence in the car was heavy. Imogen stared out the window at the passing trees. Tam fell back asleep in his car seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I felt entirely hollowed out. 7 years of marriage, destroyed in 4 days because she couldn't handle being a normal person with a normal life. We checked into the hotel. The lobby smelled like cheap vanilla air freshener and chlorine from the indoor pool. It was a far cry from the radiant floors and floor-to-ceiling glass of the luxury lodge, but right now, it felt like a fortress. I got the kids settled into the room. I gave Tam another dose of his antibiotics and put him in one of the beds with the TV tuned to a cartoon channel. Imogen sat next to him, drawing in her sketchbook. Once they were distracted, I sat down at the small laminate desk in the corner of the room, pulled out my laptop, and connected to the hotel's terrible Wi-Fi. If Coralie was desperate enough to drain the joint account in broad daylight, I needed to know what else she had been doing in the dark. I managed all our household finances, but Coralie had sole control over her LLC accounts. I had never looked too closely at them, trusting her when she said things were tight but manageable, trusting the CPA to handle the tax filings. But I knew her passwords. We used a shared password manager for the household, and she had carelessly saved her banking credentials in the same vault. I logged into her primary business checking account. The $5,700 transfer was sitting there, pending. The remaining balance was $12. I navigated to the credit accounts tab. My stomach dropped so hard I felt physically sick. There were 3 different credit cards linked to her business. One had a balance of $14,000. Another had a balance of $18,500. The third, a high-limit travel rewards card she supposedly used for networking events, was maxed out at $22,000. Over $50,000 in high-interest consumer debt hidden under the guise of an LLC. I started clicking through the recent statements, my eyes scanning the line items in a blur of disbelief. This wasn't inventory. This wasn't website hosting. These were charges for luxury aesthetics clinics in Charlotte, $1,000 dinners at high-end restaurants I had never been to, charges for professional photography shoots, designer clothes, and boutique PR agencies that clearly hadn't generated a single dime of actual revenue. She hadn't just been faking it for Stellan this weekend. She had been faking it for years, funding an entirely fictitious lifestyle on credit while I worked 55 hours a week to keep the actual roof over our heads. She was bankrupting us from the inside out just to maintain an image on social media. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Coralie. I watched the screen light up with her name, letting it ring until it went to voicemail. It buzzed again and again. Then came the texts. Where are you? Please tell me you didn't leave with the kids. Stellan told me to leave. Blythe is packing my stuff. I have nowhere to go. You took the car. Please pick up. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I'll put the money back. I stared at the glowing screen. She was stranded at a mountain lodge with a brother who had just discarded her. No vehicle and no money to pay for a ride home. She expected me to turn around, drive back up that mountain, and save her. Like I always did. Like I had done every morning when I made the oatmeal and packed the backpacks so she could sleep in and film her perfect morning routines. I blocked her number. I picked up my phone and dialed Jasper. Jasper was a guy I played squash with on Thursday nights back in Charlotte. He was also a partner at one of the most aggressive family law firms in the state. It was a Saturday evening, but he picked up on the third ring. Hey, Jasper said, sounding slightly out of breath, like I had caught him on a treadmill. You're supposed to be on a mountain drinking wine with the in-laws. I need a lawyer, Jasper, I said. My voice was completely flat, and I need one right now. The treadmill noise stopped immediately. Are the kids okay? The kids are with me at a Hampton Inn. They're safe. Okay, talk to me. I told him everything. I told him about the lodge, the helicopter, the stolen mortgage money, and the $50,000 $1,000 in hidden debt I had just uncovered. I laid it all out, sterile and factual, stripping away the emotion because I couldn't afford to feel it right now. Jasper let out a long, slow breath when I finished. All right, first things first, Jasper said, his tone shifting from friend to attorney instantly. She transferred the money from a joint account. Technically, legally, either of you has the right to move those funds. The police won't care. It's a civil issue, which means it's a divorce issue. But that debt, if those cards are in the name of the LLC, we need to find out immediately if you co-signed or if she used joint assets as collateral. I never signed anything for her business. Good. Then tomorrow morning, the first thing you do is call your HR department. I don't care if it's Sunday. Leave a voicemail for your payroll director. You intercept your direct deposit before your next check hits that joint account. You open a new checking account in your name only at a completely different bank. Not a different branch, a different bank. Okay, as for her being stranded, Jasper continued, his voice cold and practical. Do not go back and get her. Do not pay for her Uber. Do not book her a flight. She has a brother with a Porsche. Let the alpha male figure it out. If you go back to that house, you risk a physical altercation or her making an accusation of domestic disturbance to gain leverage. You stay away. I blocked her number. Keep it blocked. When you get back to Charlotte, do not go back to the marital home. Go to your brother's place or get a short-term rental. On Monday morning, you are coming into my office, and we are filing for an emergency financial injunction to freeze all joint assets before she tries to liquidate anything else. She said she was going to put the money back, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. She actually believed she could. People who drown usually drag their rescuers down with them, Jasper said quietly. Don't get back in the water. I'll see you Monday. I hung up the phone. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the muffled sound of the television. Imogen had fallen asleep sideways across the foot of the bed, her sketchbook still clutched in her hand. I walked over and gently pulled the blanket up over her shoulders. Then I went into the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the exhaust fan to cover the sound, and finally let myself break down. The next morning, we checked out of the hotel at dawn. I didn't want to be anywhere near Asheville. I wanted to put as much distance between us and that lodge as possible. We stopped at a drive-thru for breakfast, the kids eating hash browns in the back seat while I drank bitter, scalding black coffee to keep my hands from shaking. The drive back to Charlotte took 4 hours. The entire time, my mind was racing through the logistics of dismantling a life. Who to call, where to live, how to explain to a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old that their mother wasn't coming home with us. I pulled into the driveway of my older brother Arlo's house in the suburbs of Charlotte around noon. Arlo was a high school history teacher, a quiet, steady guy who had never quite understood Coralie's need for constant performance. When I called him from the road and gave him the short version, he didn't ask questions. He just told me the guest room was ready. Arlo met us in the driveway. He helped me carry the bags inside and immediately took the kids to the backyard to show them his new golden retriever puppy. I stood in his kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee maker. So, Arlo said, walking back inside and leaning against the counter. What's the play here? I'm seeing Jasper tomorrow morning to file, I said. And I need to figure out how to pay the mortgage on a house I'm not living in, while also paying for a lawyer, while also making sure my kids don't lose their minds. Arlo nodded slowly. You know she's going to try to spin this, right? To her followers, to your mutual friends. She's not going to admit she stole from you and bankrupted the family. She's going to make you the villain. I know. Are you ready for that? I don't really have a choice. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the kitchen island. I needed to draft the email to HR to reroute my paycheck. As I opened my browser, I hesitated. I unblocked Coralie's number just to see if there was any immediate emergency I needed to be aware of. Immediately, 12 voicemails and 43 text messages flooded in. The texts were a chaotic timeline of her mental state over the last 18 hours. Stellan literally kicked me out. He locked the doors. I'm sitting on the porch. It's getting cold. Please come back. I called an Uber, but no one will drive up this mountain. You have to come get me. Why are you doing this to me? You're the one who humiliated me in front of him. Fine. I got a ride with a maintenance worker. I'm at a diner in town. Send me money for a bus ticket. You are a monster for abandoning the mother of your children like this. I'm on a Greyhound. It takes 9 hours. When I get home, we are going to have a serious talk about how you treat your wife. I read the last message, sent at 6 a.m. that morning. She wasn't sorry. The panic had faded, and the entitlement had returned. She had convinced herself that she was the victim, that my exposing her lies was a worse crime than her committing financial fraud. I didn't reply. I drafted the email to payroll, attached the new banking details, and hit send. On Monday morning, I sat in Jasper's sleek, glass-walled conference room in downtown Charlotte. The city looked gray and indifferent through the windows. Jasper slid a thick stack of paperwork across the table. This is the complaint for divorce, the motion for an ex parte financial injunction, and a request for primary physical custody, Jasper said, tapping the paper with his pen. I stared at the words primary physical custody. Will a judge actually grant that? She's their mother. Normally, no. Courts prefer 50-50. But you have documented proof that she emptied a joint account without authorization and has accumulated massive, hidden debt. She's financially unstable and a flight risk with marital assets. More importantly, you have documentation showing you are the primary provider, and you just spent the weekend single parenting them after she abandoned them to socialize, followed by her being stranded hours away because she lacked the basic resources to secure transportation. Jasper leaned forward, his eyes sharp. She's going to fight you. People who live in alternate realities fight the hardest when you try to pull them back to earth. But we have the paper trail. Sign here. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line for a long second. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name. When I walked out of Jasper's office, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't Coralie. It was an unrecognized number with an Atlanta area code. I answered it on the sidewalk, the noise of traffic roaring past me. Hello, it's Stellan, the voice said. It was clipped, cold, and strictly business. I stopped walking. What do you want, Stellan? I want to make sure we understand each other, Stellan said. Coralie called me this morning. She's back in Charlotte. She's asking for a loan. She told me you locked her out of the accounts and abandoned her. I locked her out because she stole my money, and she abandoned herself. I don't care about your marital drama, Stellan interrupted. I really don't. But she also told me she owes a massive amount of money on some business credit cards, and she insinuated that if I didn't help her, she might be forced to declare bankruptcy. That sounds like her problem. It becomes my problem, Stellan said, his voice dropping an octave, because 3 years ago, when she started this little vanity project, she asked me for advice. I introduced her to a private wealth manager I use to get her high-limit lines of credit approved without real revenue. She used a letter of recommendation and a soft financial guarantee from my firm. I stood perfectly still on the concrete. The noise of the city seemed to fade away. You guaranteed her debt? debt? Not legally, but reputationally. The underwriter is a personal contact. If she defaults, it makes me look like an idiot to people who handle my real money. I cannot have my sister defaulting on $50,000 of boutique credit, so pay it for her, I said. You've got the capital, right? Alpha male. Stellan ignored the jab. I'm not bailing her out so she can keep pretending. I'm calling to tell you that I'm cutting her off completely. I've already spoken to the underwriter. They are accelerating the debt. They are going to call in the full balances due within 30 days based on a breach of terms because she lied on her revenue updates. My stomach tightened. If they call in the debt, she has nothing. They'll come after the marital estate. Exactly, Stellan said coldly. So I suggest you file for divorce and separate your assets today because by the end of the month, she's going to be radioactive and I am not stepping in to save either of you. The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. Corley hadn't just built a house of cards. She had built it on her brother's reputation, assuming he would always protect her. And now, the very person she had destroyed our marriage to impress was the one striking the match to burn her down. I stood on the sidewalk for another 30 seconds, the phone still gripped in my hand, listening to the dial tone. Then I turned around, walked back through the revolving glass doors of Jasper's building, and took the elevator straight back up to the 14th floor. The receptionist looked surprised to see me again so soon, but she waved me through when she saw my face. Jasper was standing by his desk, tossing a legal pad into his leather briefcase. He looked up. Did you forget something? He asked. Stellan just called me, I said, closing the heavy oak door behind me. Jasper paused, his hand still on the clasp of his briefcase. The brother-in-law? Why is he calling you? Because Corley used his name as a soft guarantee to open $50,000 in business credit lines, lied about her revenue to the underwriter, and Stellan just found out she's entirely broke. He called the underwriter. They're accelerating the debt. They're demanding the full balance in 30 days. Jasper slowly took his hand off the briefcase and sat back down in his desk chair. He let out a long, heavy breath, rubbing his temples. The sharp, confident lawyer from 10 minutes ago vanished, replaced by a man looking at a very messy, very expensive problem. Okay, Jasper said quietly. Okay, this changes the timeline. Drastically, she hid it in the LLC, I said, my voice rising slightly. My name isn't on any of those cards. I never signed a personal guarantee. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, Jasper said, leaning forward and steepling his fingers. The courts generally presume that any debt acquired during the marriage by either spouse is marital debt. It doesn't matter whose name is on the plastic. The baseline assumption is that the debt was used to benefit the marital estate, buying groceries, paying the mortgage, funding family vacations. It didn't benefit the estate. She spent it on Botox, PR firms, and $1,000 dinners. She operated at a loss while I paid for literally everything we own. I believe you, Jasper said calmly, holding up a hand, but we have to prove it to a judge. It's called marital waste. We have to show, with agonizingly precise documentation, that she willfully dissipated marital assets for non-marital purposes, and that she actively concealed it from you. If we can't prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt, a judge might take that 50 grand and slice it right down the middle, subtracting $25,000 from your share of the house equity to pay off her creditors. I felt the blood drain from my head. She steals my money, ruins our marriage, and I have to buy her out of her own fraudulent debt? Not if we move faster than the creditors, Jasper said, pulling a fresh legal pad toward him. I'm filing the injunction today. I'm also going to file a motion for a temporary restraining order on the dissipation of assets. But I need you to go through those credit card statements, line by line. I need a spreadsheet, every injection, every spa day, every aesthetic yoga mat. I need to prove she was funding a delusion, not a family. I left his office for the second time, feeling like I had a 100-pound weight strapped to my chest. By the time I got back to Arlo's house, it was late afternoon. The suburban street was quiet, sprinklers ticking over manicured lawns. Inside, the reality of my new life was in full swing. Arlo was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of macaroni and cheese, while Tam sat at the kitchen island, kicking his legs and coloring. Imogen was on the couch, staring blankly at a muted television. Hey, Arlo said, keeping his voice low as I walked in. How'd it go? It's going to be a bloodbath, I muttered, dropping my keys on the counter. I walked over to the couch and sat down next to Imogen. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo we used at home. Dad? She asked quietly, not looking away from the TV. Yeah, sweetie? When are we going home? The question felt like a physical blow. I tightened my arm around her. Not for a little while, Immy. Uncle Arlo is going to let us stay here and hang out with the new puppy. Is that okay? Where is Mom? Mom is. She's sorting some things out in her own space right now. I hated the vague, sanitized language, but I couldn't tell an 8-year-old that her mother was a financial predator who was currently stranded somewhere between reality and a total breakdown. Imogen didn't ask anything else. She just leaned heavier against me, accepting the new, fractured normal with a quiet resignation that broke my heart. After I got the kids fed, bathed, and put to bed in Arlo's guest room, I sat down at the kitchen island with my laptop. I pulled up Corley's business credit card statements and started the grueling work Jasper had assigned me. Line by line, I built the spreadsheet of her lies. March 12, Radiant Glow Aesthetics, $1,200. April 4, The Coterie PR Agency, $3,500. April 18, Nobu Atlanta, $850. I was an hour into the spreadsheet when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Bowen, a guy I used to play golf with. His wife, Sage, was one of Corley's closest friends in the local wellness influencer circle. Bowen, hey man, just checking in. Things okay with you guys? I stared at the message. Bowen and I weren't close enough for random wellness checks on a Monday night. It's a long story. We separated this weekend. The 3 little typing dots appeared immediately, vanished, then appeared again. Bowen, Sage just showed me Corley's private Instagram story. You need to see this. A second later, a screenshot came through. It was a text-based post against a black background. The font was small, delicate, and entirely weaponized. I never thought I would be a victim of financial abuse. This weekend, my husband abruptly emptied our family bank accounts, locked me out of our shared finances, and abandoned me hundreds of miles from home without a vehicle or a way to feed myself. He took my children. I am terrified. I am heartbroken, and I am starting over with nothing. Please, if you see him, do not engage. I am working with authorities to get my babies back safely. Thank you to the friends who are keeping me housed right now. I read it 3 times. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it made my vision blur. She had perfectly inverted reality. She was the one who drained the account. She was the one who prioritized her brother's approval over her children's security. But to her 3,000 followers and our entire social circle, she was the battered, financially coerced victim, and I was a monster who kidnapped her kids. Arlo, I called out, my voice rough. Arlo walked in from the living room, a beer in his hand. What's wrong? I turned the phone around and showed him the screenshot. He read it, his jaw tightening, a hard, cold look settling over his face. She's establishing a narrative, Arlo said, setting his beer down. She knows you have the actual bank records, so she's fighting the war in the court of public opinion. She wants your mutual friends to cut you off so you have no support system. She said she's working with authorities to get her babies back safely, I quoted, my pulse hammering in my ears. She's framing this as a kidnapping. You have joint custody by default right now, Arlo reminded me. There's no custody order in place. You didn't kidnap anyone. You removed them from a toxic situation. But you need to send this screenshot to Jasper right now. If she actually goes to the police with this lie, they might show up here. I took a screenshot of Bowen's text and forwarded it directly to Jasper's emergency email. I didn't have to wait for the police. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the front window of Arlo's living room. A white Range Rover pulled up to the curb, parking aggressively over the edge of the driveway. I knew that car. It belonged to Vesper, another woman from Coralie's aesthetic yoga clique. Arlo, I said, standing up quickly, pushing the laptop away. Arlo was already moving toward the front door, turning on the porch light. We stood in the entryway and watched through the narrow glass side lights. Vesper cut the engine. The passenger door opened, and Coralie stepped out. She looked calculatedly disheveled. She was wearing an oversized gray cardigan, her hair tied in a messy, chaotic bun. She had clearly scrubbed off her makeup to ensure she looked pale and exhausted. She looked exactly like the victim she was pretending to be on the internet. She marched up the front walk, Vesper trailing a few steps behind her like a bodyguard. Before Coralie could even reach for the doorbell, Arlo opened the heavy wooden door, leaving the locked glass storm door shut between us. I stood right behind him. Coralie stopped on the porch, her eyes locking onto mine through the glass. The frail victim act slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of pure, venomous rage, before she forced her face back into a mask of desperate sorrow. Open the door, she demanded, her voice shaking with manufactured emotion. I am here for my children. The kids are asleep, Coralie, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. You are not waking them up, and you are not taking them anywhere. You have no right to keep them from me, she yelled, her voice loud enough to echo down the quiet street. She slapped her palm flat against the glass of the storm door. You stole all our money. You left me to die on that mountain. Coralie, stop, Arlo said, his voice deep and authoritative. Do not come to my house and scream. You are scaring the neighbors, and you are going to wake your kids. I don't care about your neighbors. She screamed at him. She looked back at me. I want my kids, and I want my debit card unlocked now, or Vesper is calling the police. Vesper stepped forward, holding her phone up as if it were a weapon. She's serious. We will tell them you are holding the children hostage. I looked at Vesper. Did she tell you why we left Asheville, Vesper? Did she tell you she transferred the mortgage money to her LLC to buy a helicopter ride? Did she tell you she's $50,000 in debt? Vesper blinked, hesitating, looking sideways at Coralie. Coralie's face flushed a deep, ugly red. Shut up. You are a liar. You are a controlling, abusive liar. Stellan called me, I said. The words cut through her screaming like a knife. Coralie froze, her mouth still half open. Her hand slowly slid down the glass of the door. What? She whispered. Stellan called me this afternoon, I repeated, making sure Vesper could hear every single word. He told me he spoke to the underwriter. He told them he is entirely withdrawing his support for your business because you lied about your revenue. Coralie took a step back, stumbling slightly on the porch mat. The color completely vanished from her face, leaving her looking genuinely, terribly sick. No, she breathed. No, he wouldn't do that. He promised. He did do it, I said flatly. They're accelerating the debt, Coralie. They're calling in the $50,000 in 30 days. You don't have a business anymore. You don't have a brother who covers for you anymore. And as of this morning, you don't have access to my salary anymore. It is over. For a long, agonizing second, the silence on the porch was absolute. The crickets in Arlo's front yard seemed deafening. Coralie looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to jump out of the bushes and tell her this was a prank. When she looked back at me, the victim mask was entirely gone. What replaced it was the terrified, cornered look of an animal that realizes the trap has finally snapped shut. She looked at Vesper, then back at me. Her chest started heaving. You think you've won, Coralie hissed, her voice dropping into a guttural, terrifying whisper. You think you can just embarrass me and walk away with my kids? She grabbed the heavy brass handle of the storm door and rattled it violently against the lock. I will burn you to the ground before I let you take them from me. I am calling the cops right now, and I am telling them you hit me in Asheville before you stole the car. I didn't blink. I just raised my index finger and pointed to the upper right corner of the doorframe. A small, rectangular smart doorbell was mounted to the brick, its tiny blue lead ring glowing steadily in the dark. Arlo, I said, my voice perfectly level, not taking my eyes off my wife. Did the camera catch that? Motion activated 4 minutes ago, Arlo said from behind me. He held up his phone, the screen illuminating his face, audio and video. 1080p, it just synced to the cloud. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization hit Coralie like a physical blow. Her mouth snapped shut. The wild, unhinged energy radiating off her vanished, instantly replaced by a stark, suffocating panic. She stared at the blue light on the camera, fully comprehending that she had just permanently documented herself, threatening to invent a domestic violence charge to steal custody of our children. Behind her, Vesper let out a sharp, ragged breath. Vesper was a woman whose entire brand was built on matcha lattes, positive vibrations, and lucrative brand sponsorships. She was not a woman who wanted to be subpoenaed as an accessory to a malicious false police report. I'm leaving, Vesper said, her voice high and tight. Coralie spun around. Wait, please. No, Vesper snapped, backing away down the walkway, holding her hands up as if Coralie were radioactive. Do not text me. Do not tag me. I am not getting involved in this. You told me he left you on the side of the road. You didn't tell me you were 50 grand in debt and threatening to lie to the cops. Vesper practically sprinted the rest of the way to her Range Rover. She yanked the door open, threw herself inside, and started the engine. Vesper. Coralie screamed, running across the damp grass. The Range Rover slammed into reverse, backing over the edge of Arlo's lawn, and sped off down the suburban street, its taillights disappearing around the corner. Coralie stood alone in the street, wrapped in her oversized cardigan, the cool night air suddenly pressing in on her. She turned slowly back toward the house. I didn't say another word. I stepped back, and Arlo pushed the heavy wooden front door shut. I threw the deadbolt. I locked the chain. I stood in the entryway, listening. For 5 minutes, there was nothing. Then, the sound of an engine idling. I checked Arlo's phone screen. An Uber had pulled up. Coralie got in, and the car drove away. Send me that video right now, I told Arlo. He texted the file directly to my phone. I forwarded it immediately to Jasper with a single sentence. She showed up at the house and threatened to fake a DV charge for custody. Jasper's reply came through less than a minute later. Video received. Downloaded to 3 secure servers. She just handed us primary custody on a silver platter. Go to sleep. Tomorrow gets ugly. He was right. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. out of pure habit. The house was quiet. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, listening to Tam's soft breathing from the trundle bed next to me. I got up, showered, and put on a suit. If I was going to lose my marriage, my savings, and my house, I wasn't going to lose my job, too. I drove into downtown Charlotte and walked into my architecture firm at 7:45 a.m. The office was usually empty this early, save for the cleaning crew and maybe 1 or 2 junior draftspeople. But as I walked past the glass-walled conference rooms toward my desk, I saw Tess, our director of HR, standing in the hallway. She had a thick manila folder in her hands, and she looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Can I see you in my office?" Tess asked. It wasn't a request. I followed her down the hall, my stomach tightening. Tess closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "I received an email this morning," Tess said, sitting behind her desk and opening the folder. Actually, every managing partner in the firm received it. It was sent to the general executive inbox at 3:15 a.m. She turned a printed sheet of paper around and slid it across the desk toward me. It was an email from Coralie. "To the managing partners of, I am writing to you as a terrified mother and the wife of your senior architect. Over the weekend, my husband experienced a severe psychological break. He has entirely drained our family's financial resources, leaving me and our 2 young children without food, transportation, or a safe place to live. He is currently withholding my access to all marital funds in an attempt to financially coerce and abuse me. I am begging you to intervene. As his employer, I am asking that you immediately garnish his paychecks and reroute his salary directly to my account so I can feed our children. He is unstable, and I fear for our safety if he continues to have unchecked access to the capital that sustains our family." I read the words, the black ink blurring slightly at the edges of my vision. It was a perfectly executed, corporate-targeted character assassination. She couldn't drain my bank account anymore, so she was trying to hijack my salary at the source by weaponizing HR. "Tess," I started, keeping my voice as steady as humanly possible. "This is entirely fabricated. We separated this weekend because I discovered she had hidden over $50,000 in business debt and emptied our mortgage account to pay for a vacation." Tess held up a hand. Her expression was sympathetic but guarded. "I don't want to get into the middle of a marital dispute. It's not my place, and it's not the firm's place. Legally, we cannot reroute an employee's direct deposit without a court order, so we will not be honoring her request. Thank you." However, Tess continued, her tone shifting to strict corporate liability. She used the words psychological break, unstable, and fear for our safety. "When an employee's spouse contacts the partners alleging severe mental instability and potential violence, the firm has a legal obligation to address the liability. If you were to snap and make an error on a structural blueprint, or if an altercation occurred on company property, we would be negligent for ignoring a written warning." I stared at her. "You're sending me home." "Administrative leave," Tess corrected gently. "Fully paid. 3 days, just until our legal counsel reviews the communication and confirms there's no threat to the workplace. It's standard protocol." "She is lying to destroy my career because I cut off her credit cards," I said, the injustice of it burning in my throat. I pulled out my phone and pulled up the Ring camera video. "I can prove it. Right now." "I can't look at that," Tess said quickly, looking away from the screen. "Please put that away. I am not an investigator. I am just protecting the firm. Go home. Take the 3 days to deal with your personal matters. We'll call you on Thursday." I walked out of the building at 8:15 a.m., carrying my laptop bag, feeling the eyes of the receptionist burning a hole in my back. Coralie hadn't even been awake for a full day since the fallout, and she had already managed to humiliate me in front of the people who signed my paychecks. I got back to Arlo's house just as the kids were finishing their cereal. Arlo had taken the week off to help me navigate the chaos. I told him what happened at the firm while I poured a cup of coffee I didn't want. "She's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks," Arlo said, leaning against the counter. "She has no money, no brother, and no friends. All she has left is leverage. She's trying to make you so miserable, so professionally terrified, that you'll just give her what she wants to make it stop." "I'm not giving her a dime," I said. My phone vibrated on the granite island. It was an incoming call from Thad, the headmaster at the kids' private school. I set my coffee mug down. The school was a fiercely competitive, highly expensive institution. Tuition was $22,000 a year per child. We had prepaid the entire fall semester in August, entirely from my salary, because the school offered a 5% discount for upfront payment. I answered the phone. "This is Thad." "Good morning," Thad said, his voice clipped and professional. "I'm calling regarding a highly unusual administrative request we received this morning regarding Imogen and Tam." "What kind of request?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "Your wife is currently sitting in our admissions office," Thad said. "She has submitted emergency withdrawal paperwork for both children, effective immediately. She stated that the family is relocating out of state due to an unforeseen employment change." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. "We are not relocating, Thad. We are going through a divorce." There was a brief pause on the line. "I see." I suspected there might be a discrepancy, given her secondary request. "What secondary request?" "Our policy states that if a student is withdrawn before October 1st, the family is entitled to a prorated refund of the prepaid tuition," Thad explained slowly. "It's a substantial amount of money, roughly $34,000. Coralie is demanding that the refund check be cut today, expedited, and made payable directly to her business LLC, rather than the joint account we have on file, citing an issue with banking fraud." The kitchen seemed to tilt. She wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was actively liquidating our children's education. She was pulling them out of the school they loved, separating them from their friends and their teachers, just to get her hands on the tuition refund so she could pay off her boutique credit cards before the underwriter sued her. She was cannibalizing her own kids' stability to save her public image. "Do not cut that check, Thad," I said, my voice dropping to a hard, cold register I didn't know I possessed. "Do not process the withdrawal. I have an emergency financial injunction being filed this morning that freezes all marital assets, including prepaid educational funds. I cannot hold the funds indefinitely if a custodial parent requests a valid withdrawal," Thad warned. "Without a court order, she has equal right to disenroll them. I will have the order by noon. Stall her. Tell her the accounting department requires 48 hours to issue a check of that size. Tell her the signatory is off campus. I don't care what you tell her. Just do not hand her that money. I will inform her that the refund is pending administrative review." Thad agreed quietly. "But I suggest you move quickly." I hung up the phone and looked at Arlo. "She tried to cash out the kids' tuition," I said. Arlo stared at me. "She's going to burn the house down with everyone inside." "I need to go to the courthouse," I said, grabbing my keys. Jasper is filing the ex parte motion this morning. I have to be there to sign the affidavit. I drove to the county courthouse in a state of absolute icy focus. I met Jasper in the lobby. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, carrying a thick binder of documents. I told him about the firm, and I told him about the school. Jasper didn't look surprised. He just nodded, flipping open his binder. We anticipated the liquidation attempt, Jasper said, handing me a pen. That's why we're here. The judge is reviewing the ex parte motion in chambers right now. Because of the video evidence of her threatening a false police report and the documented proof of the $5,700 transfer, we have a very strong case for an immediate temporary freeze. We sat in the polished wooden benches outside the courtroom for an hour. My leg bounced involuntarily. I kept checking my phone, expecting another disaster. Expecting a text from my bank saying the house had been put up for sale. Expecting a call from the police. Finally, the bailiff opened the heavy oak doors and gestured to Jasper. Jasper went in alone. He was in chambers for exactly 12 minutes. When he walked out, he was holding a stack of papers stamped with a bright red seal. Done, Jasper said, handing me a copy. The judge granted the emergency injunction. All joint bank accounts, credit lines, and prepaid assets are frozen. Neither of you can move a dollar without court approval. Furthermore, the judge granted a temporary restraining order on the dissipation of marital assets. If she tries to sell a piece of furniture, pawn a watch, or cash a tuition refund check, she will be held in contempt of court and face jail time. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since Asheville. And the school? I'm emailing the stamped order to the headmaster right now, Jasper said, typing rapidly on his phone. The money is locked. The kids stay enrolled. What about custody? The judge granted you temporary exclusive use of the marital home and temporary primary physical custody pending the preliminary hearing next week, Jasper said, looking up from his phone. The video of her threatening the false DV charge terrified the judge. The court does not look kindly on people who try to weaponize the police. She is allowed supervised visitation only until we get to court. I looked down at the paperwork. It was real. The boundaries were finally drawn in ink. She has to leave the house, I said. She has until 5:00 p.m. today to vacate the premises, Jasper confirmed. I just sent the order to a process server. He's heading to the marital home right now to serve her. You are legally cleared to return to your house tonight, but I strongly advise you to request a civil standby from the local precinct when you go back. Do not walk into that house alone with her. I thanked Jasper, got back in my car, and drove to the local police precinct. I showed the desk sergeant the stamped court order granting me exclusive use of the home and requested an officer to accompany me to ensure a peaceful transition. At 4:30 p.m., I pulled onto my street, a marked police cruiser trailing directly behind me. My house, a 4-bedroom colonial we had bought 5 years ago, looked entirely normal from the outside. The lawn was cut, the hydrangeas were blooming, but Stellan's massive Porsche wasn't in the driveway, and Vesper's Range Rover was nowhere to be seen. Corley's car, the Subaru I had taken to Arlo's, was obviously absent. She had no vehicle. I parked in the driveway. The police officer, a tall, older man with a calm demeanor, walked up to the front door with me. I'll do the talking, the officer said. He knocked heavily on the door. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. I pulled my key out, unlocked the deadbolt, and pushed the door open. Corley, the officer called out, stepping into the foyer. Charlotte Police Department. Is anyone home? Silence. I walked past the officer, stepping into my own living room. It took my brain a few seconds to process what I was looking at. The house wasn't empty, but it had been entirely, systematically gutted of anything with liquid value. The 70-inch flat-screen television was gone from the wall, leaving only the bare metal bracket. The vintage Persian rug we had bought on our honeymoon was missing from the floor. I walked into the dining room. The antique silver flatware set my grandmother had given us was gone from the sideboard. I ran up the stairs, my heart pounding, the officer right behind me. I threw open the door to my home office, my dual monitor setup, my drafting tablet, and my high-end architectural desktop computer. The tools I needed to do my job were gone. The cables had been violently yanked from the wall, leaving the outlet covers cracked. Check the bedrooms, the officer said, his hand resting casually on his radio. I went into the master bedroom. Corley's closet was empty. Every designer bag, every pair of shoes, every expensive piece of clothing she had bought to maintain her fake aesthetic was gone. She hadn't just packed a bag. She had hired a moving crew, or a junk hauler, or whoever she could find on short notice, and stripped the house of every valuable asset she could physically carry before the court order was served. I walked slowly back downstairs. The officer was standing in the kitchen, looking at a piece of paper resting on the granite island. He stepped back and let me read it. It wasn't a letter. It was a printed receipt from a high-end consignment warehouse across town. Attached to the receipt was a single, handwritten sticky note, written in Corley's immaculate, looping script. You locked my accounts. I needed a surplus. See you in court. I read the note twice, the sheer stupidity of it freezing me in place. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just handed the sticky note and the printed receipt to the police officer standing next to me. He read it, looked up at the empty wall where the television used to be, and let out a long, slow whistle. Sir, the officer said, pulling a small notebook and a pen from his breast pocket. Did a judge sign an order freezing the dissipation of marital assets today? At 10:30 this morning, I said. And she left you the receipt showing exactly where she took the stolen property, he muttered, shaking his head in a mixture of disbelief and professional amusement. I've been on the force 20 years. I've never seen someone actively document their own felony contempt of court. I pulled out my phone, snapped a crystal clear photo of the sticky note and the consignment warehouse receipt, and texted it directly to Jasper. My phone rang less than 30 seconds later. Tell me this is a joke, Jasper said the second I answered. He didn't sound stressed. He sounded like a man who had just won the lottery. It's sitting on my kitchen island, I told him. She gutted the house. My work computers, the electronics, her entire closet. She hauled it to a high-end consignment warehouse across town. She didn't sell it to a private buyer, Jasper said, his voice speeding up with absolute legal predatory joy. She put it on consignment, which means the property hasn't been liquidated yet. It's sitting in a warehouse, logged with a paper trail, tied to an LLC she owns, and she did it on the exact same day a judge explicitly ordered her not to move a single dime of marital value. What do we do? You let the officer take his report, Jasper said firmly. Get the incident number. Tomorrow morning, I am walking into the courthouse and filing an emergency motion for contempt, and I am subpoenaing the consignment warehouse to freeze the inventory. She thought she was being clever. She just handed us the entire divorce on a silver platter. I hung up the phone. The officer took my statement, walked through the house, and photographed the empty spaces. He gave me a business card with the incident number written on the back and left. I stood alone in the center of my living room. The house felt cavernous without the rugs and the furniture, but for the first time in 7 years, the The air didn't feel heavy. It felt entirely, perfectly clear. The preliminary hearing took place 6 days later. The courtroom was paneled in dark wood, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Jasper. Coralie sat 20 feet away at the respondent's table. She had managed to scrape together enough money to hire a lawyer, a frantic-looking man in a cheap suit. But she didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked terrified. Judge Locke was a woman in her late 60s with zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. She had the entire file in front of her. The bank transfer records, the $50,000 in hidden business debt, the Ring camera footage from Arlo's porch, and the police report documenting the gutted house and the sticky note. Coralie's lawyer tried to speak, launching into a rehearsed speech about financial disparity and my supposed controlling behavior. Judge Locke cut him off before he finished his second sentence. "Counselor," the judge said, her voice cutting through the room like a physical blade. "Your client emptied a joint checking account, threatened to fabricate a domestic violence charge to weaponize the police for custody leverage, and then, hours after being served with an injunction, stripped the marital home of over $40,000 in assets." Judge Locke looked directly at Coralie. Coralie shrank down in her chair, her eyes wide, the arrogant facade completely obliterated. "Mrs. Hensley," the judge said coldly, "you are entirely out of touch with reality. You are ordered to return every single item you consigned to the marital home within 48 hours, or I will issue a warrant for your arrest for contempt of court. You will receive zero spousal support pending the finalization of this divorce, as you have willfully dissipated marital funds. Your husband is granted exclusive use of the marital home and full physical and legal custody of the children." Coralie let out a sharp, gasping sob. "You are granted supervised visitation for 2 hours on Saturday mornings," the judge finished, slamming the file shut, "at a facility of your husband's choosing. We are adjourned." Coralie collapsed forward onto the table, burying her face in her arms. There was no Instagram filter for this. There was no brother to bail her out. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I just stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the courtroom. A month later, Stellan's 30-day window expired. The private underwriter called in Coralie's business debt. Because of the divorce proceedings and the judge's ruling on marital waste, the debt was assigned entirely to her LLC. She had no assets to shield herself. She was forced to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, completely liquidating her fake wellness empire. She moved into a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of Charlotte, working a low-level retail job to pay for her supervised visitation fees. I got my job back off administrative leave the same week. Tess from HR called me in, apologized for the mandatory suspension, and offered me the lead project manager spot on a new commercial build. The house is quiet now. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. The kitchen is fully furnished again, the items retrieved from the warehouse and put back in their rightful places. The morning light is just starting to hit the granite counters. I'm standing at the stove, stirring oatmeal. Tam runs into the kitchen, his backpack sliding off one shoulder, his hair sticking up in the back. Imogen follows him, carrying her sketchbook. "Dad," Tam says, climbing onto one of the bar stools. "I can't find my green folder." "It's in the front pocket of your bag, buddy," I tell him, sliding a bowl of oatmeal in front of him. "I packed it last night." He checks, pulls out the green folder, and grins. "Found it." I pour myself a cup of coffee and lean against the counter. There is no one upstairs filming a skincare routine. There is no one demanding a helicopter ride. There is just my kids, eating breakfast in the home I pay for, safe and entirely at peace. It works beautifully.